It is the 1880s in Austin, Texas, a city of cowboys and cattlemen, of dusty streets and new money, of saloons and rough justice. Austin is still more frontier than modern metropolis. Gas lamps flicker weakly against the shadows, horses clatter down wooden planked streets, and whispers carry easily across the night air. But beneath the growing pride of this frontier town, a wave of horror was about to unfold, a series of killings so brutal, so shocking, that even hardened lawmen and frontier settlers could scarcely comprehend it. The killer would strike from the darkness, dragging women from their beds, attacking them with unimaginable violence, and vanishing like a phantom. He became known as the Servant Girl Annihilator, and though his name has long been overshadowed by another infamous killer across the ocean, Jack the Ripper, many believe that Austin's phantom killer may have been the very same man. This is the story of America's first recorded serial killer, and the nightmare that gripped Austin in the 1880s. Austin in 1884 was not yet the modern capital of Texas we know today. It was a booming but volatile town, straddling the line between a rugged frontier outpost and a budding political hub. By day, the streets were alive with traders, ranchers, and politicians. By night, the city quieted, with families tucked away behind flimsy wooden walls, and workers, many of them African-American servants, settling in small cabins behind wealthy households. The racial and class divisions were stark. Formerly enslaved, black men and women worked as domestic laborers for the city's white elite. They lived in tiny quarters, often on the very properties where they worked. And it was here, in these overlooked homes and cabins, that terror first took root. The first victim was Molly Smith, a 25-year-old black servant who worked for a prominent Austin family. On the bitterly cold night of December 30th, she was dragged from her bed in her employer's backyard servant quarters. Neighbors awoke to muffled cries and the sound of a struggle. But by the time they rushed over, Molly was gone. Her body was found in the yard, barely clothed, savagely beaten with an axe. Her head had been split open, her body mutilated. The brutality stunned even hardened frontier lawmen. At first, the police treated it as an isolated case of drunken rage, perhaps, or a crime of passion. But it would not be the last. 5 months later, Eliza Shelley, another black servant, was attacked. Like Molly, she was taken from her quarters at night. She too was bludgeoned to death with an axe, her body left in horrific condition. This was no longer coincidence. The killer struck with stealth and fury, leaving little trace, and Austin began to whisper, "There is a phantom in the night." By the summer of 1885, fear began to spread through the city. In May, just weeks after Eliza's murder, Irene Cross, a servant living near the center of town, was brutally attacked in her home. She was hacked with a sharp blade, so violently that parts of her face and head were nearly unrecognizable. She survived long enough to describe her attacker as a big, dark figure before succumbing to her wounds. The words chilled Austin. This was no random murderer. It was a predator. On July 6, 1885, the killer struck again. This time, the victim was Rebecca Ramey, another black servant, and her 11-year-old daughter Mary. Rebecca was knocked unconscious, but survived. Little Mary did not. She was dragged from her bed, her tiny body brutally assaulted and left lifeless in the yard. The crime shocked Austin to its core. Until then, some had dismissed the killings as attacks confined to the servant quarters, a distant horror for the city's elite. But the murder of a child tore down those illusions. Nobody was safe. The killer's boldness grew. In August 1885, he targeted Clara Dick, another servant. She was attacked viciously, but managed to survive, though she was left traumatized and disfigured. By now, newspapers across Texas had begun reporting on the murders, labeling Austin a city under siege. Citizens demanded answers, and the police struggled to cope with the fear consuming their streets. But the Servant Girl Annihilator was far from done. The year ended with horror. On Christmas Eve, 1885, the killer escalated to a new level of audacity. That night, he targeted not servants, but 2 women from Austin's white elite. Susan Hancock, a well-known Austin socialite, was attacked in her home. Her body was found in her backyard, horrifically mutilated. At nearly the same time, across town, Eula Phillips, just 17 years old, was murdered in a similar fashion. She was struck down, her skull crushed, her body desecrated in ways too shocking for newspapers of the time to print. 2 women, 2 elite families. One night, Austin erupted in panic. The murders of Hancock and Phillips marked a turning point. The black community had long been living in fear, but now the white elite saw themselves as targets too. For the first time, the city's powerful demanded urgent action. Men armed themselves with rifles and patrolled the streets. Families refused to sleep in their homes, instead gathering in groups for safety. Rumors ran wild. Some claimed the killer was a madman living in the woods, others that he was a doctor with surgical skill. And still, the killings continued. Police arrested dozens of suspects. Husbands, boyfriends, drifters, anyone who might plausibly be blamed. In some cases, men were convicted despite flimsy evidence. Jimmy Phillips, Eula's husband, was even charged with her murder, but no conviction ever truly stuck. The authorities were under pressure, desperate to show progress, but the truth was unavoidable. They had no idea who the killer was. The press gave the murderer his name, the Servant Girl Annihilator. Some called him the Midnight Assassin. But who was he? A local man. Some believed he was a laborer who knew the servant quarters well, a jealous lover. Others suggested the killings were fueled by rage or betrayal, a doctor or butcher. The precise mutilations led to theories of surgical knowledge, a foreign phantom. One of the most chilling theories is that after terrorizing Austin, the killer vanished overseas to London just 3 years later. In 1888, the Whitechapel district of London was stalked by another phantom, Jack the Ripper. The similarities are striking. Women attacked at night, horrific mutilations, surgical precision, and a killer who evaded capture. Some historians and criminologists have speculated that the Servant Girl, Annihilator, and Jack the Ripper may have been the same man, a transient, perhaps, who left Texas when the heat grew too strong, only to resume his horrors across the Atlantic. It is a theory impossible to prove but tantalizing to imagine. By 1886, the murders in Austin stopped as suddenly as they had begun. No culprit was ever caught. No confessions were ever made. The city slowly moved on, eager to bury the shame of its failure to protect its citizens. For decades, the story of the Servant Girl Annihilator faded into obscurity, overshadowed by the more infamous Jack the Ripper. But in recent years, historians have revisited the case, recognizing it for what it truly was: the first documented serial killer spree in American history. The Servant Girl Annihilator left behind more than bodies. He left scars on Austin's communities, on its racial divides, and on its collective memory. He showed that even in a city bursting with new life and ambition, darkness could slip between the cracks of progress, and he remains a phantom, a shadow in history, a killer who got away. The Servant Girl Annihilator was never caught. His true identity remains a mystery. Was he a jealous lover, a mad doctor, or was he the same monster who would later haunt the foggy streets of London as Jack the Ripper? The truth may never be known, but one thing is certain: Austin in the 1880s was the hunting ground of America's first serial killer, and his legend still lingers in the dark corners of Texas history. Stay curious, stay cautious, and as always, stay safe.